Hello?
We can't hear you. Turn your mic
Oh,
on.
I was muted. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I just did a great intro too. Hi, Gloria and Jeremy. Hi, everybody at home. I am Jayme CheeseSlice. Um, and this is Uncontrolled Opposition. We've got a good show for you today. We've got Jerry Colby, who is the author of DuPont Dynasty, and we're going to record an hour for the radio, about 55 minutes, and I think this is going to be a good one. This is a story I don't know a whole lot about. I've only heard like the rumblings of the story before, and we've got the man here who's done a lot of the investigation on it. So let's get to this. Going to hand it off to Gloria. It's your take it
Hey,
away.
Jerry.
Take it away. Hi,
Hello.
Jerry. Welcome to the show. We're very, very excited to have you here today. All right. It's your
Okay.
show, Gloria. Take it away.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. Today's guest is Gerard Colby, author and past president of the U.S. National Writers Union. Jerry's here to tell us about his book on the DuPont family. It's called The DuPont Dynasty, Behind the Nylon Curtain. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Free speech in America doesn't always die in courtrooms or under dictatorships. It dies quietly through boardrooms, contracts, and marketing decisions. The publishing world has a term for it: privishing, short for private publishing. That's when a publisher technically releases a book but prints so few copies or promotes it so little that it never actually reaches the public. It's not banned, it's buried. A classic case was Jerry's book on the DuPonts. His book expressed how one of America's wealthiest dynasties built its empire through war contracts, chemicals, and political influence, from early gunpowder monopolies to the spread of toxic compounds like Teflon's forever chemicals. This was not flattering, to say the least, and the DuPont family clearly didn't like it. But they didn't sue. They didn't argue. All of these things would have caused negative publicity and increased book sales, as controversy usually does. So instead, they simply applied behind the scenes pressure. So much so that the Book of the Month Club canceled its pre order, and Prentice Hall quietly cut the print run. The courts later ruled the publisher had that right, and that decision, corporate censorship, found its perfect disguise: market choice. Privishing didn't end with the DuPont family and Jerry. It morphed into a tool that surfaces whenever truth threatens the status quo or the reputation of a member of the predator class that is still useful to it. Books investigating pharmaceutical giants, energy monopolies, oligarchs, and political foundations have faced sudden marketing adjustments or mysterious warehouse delays. The same principle extends to film and music. Documentaries disappear from distribution after legal concerns. Artists lose contracts when lyrics clash with brand sponsorships. In each case, it's not an official ban, it's a strategic vanishing. That's the brilliance of modern censorship. It leaves no smoke, no ash, no burned book lists, just silence. So when a controversial work never seems to find its audience, it's worth asking whether that audience ever had a fair chance to find it. Because in a corporate information economy, control isn't about stopping words from being written, it's about making sure they're never widely read. That's the legacy of privishing, the quiet art of making Inconvenient Truths Invisible. Thank you. To start off, Jerry, please tell us about yourself. What inspired you to write about the DuPonts? Thank you.
I was working as a congressional press secretary for Congressman John Dow in New York. When we noticed that there were a lot of money that was going into to his opponent, who was a former commander of the American Legion, and he suddenly we noticed that there was a lot of money coming into him, and where it was coming from was Delaware. And I observed that, and later on, I uncovered the fact that the DuPonts were involved in the longest peacetime occupation of an American city, at least until Trump period, and it was in Wilmington, Delaware, and throughout the state of Vermont, excuse me, of Delaware as well. So what I did is essentially go down and investigate, and found out that the whole, as Nader called it, Delaware is a company state controlled by the DuPont family, and had been since, I'd say they first landed in 1800. So I examined this further and found out that the secret of their power was control over the workforce, making sure that they hired only people that spoke French, so they couldn't communicate with anybody, and hiring people who were essentially isolated, and then using them to make gunpowder. The DuPonts had been making gunpowder since France, when they made it for King Louis the 16th. They were the last people to defend the king with drawn swords, and that corrupt monarchy, as you know, was overthrown by the French Revolution. Well, the DuPonts never forgot the French Revolution, and they kept looking for other revolutions that could occur in their lives, including in Delaware. So they made sure that there was access to information, which now I can assume has been extended throughout the country, and they had control over that information. So we're still suffering from that. They still follow that game plan quite successfully up until they left DuPont Company, but they're still practicing it in the sense of their hostility toward this book. It goes back to 1970. 1970 and the 70s, 72 to 74. I finished wrapping up my research, and I contacted them and asked them for interviews. That's what you normally do. You ask for interviews with the people that you're suppressing, that you've been suppressed by now. But actually, they hadn't been suppressed yet. So I asked them, would you do an interview with them? And I found of a score of DuPonts, not one was willing to be interviewed. So I went ahead with the book, and what I didn't know was that the DuPonts had launched an investigation of me, and they couldn't find anything on me. There was nothing on me to find. So what they did is they leaked a copy of my. As soon as they learned about the book, they learned about it because there was a copy of the book sent to them by Prentice Hall through who was the publisher, through a bookstore that had been owned by the DuPonts. And J. Bruce Breton, who was Ernie DuPont's brother-in-law, came by and collected that copy and delivered it right away to Ernie. Ernie, who was really the patriarch at that time of the family, took one look at it, and I don't know if he ever read the book, But the most important thing is that he assumed that it was that it was something that should not be read. So the next thing I knew is that someone knocked on my door. His name was Mark Duke. He was stationed. He had been stationed at Dover Air Force Base, who also reported for the Delaware State News on civil disturbances. And he approached me and said, "Look, I'm a friend of your writer friend William Hoffman in Dover, Delaware," and he said, "I'd like to interview you." And I said, "Sure," in my naivete. And I said, "Sure, why not?" Well, I still have that position. So he interviewed me, and then he got access. He asked if I could get access to my files. Being a good friend of William Hoffman, I said, "Sure." He looked into my files, came back. Next thing I know, behind my back, he's working with William Hoffman to set me up with a new literary agent, which was my literary agent. And this conflict would eventually cost that literary agent his position in the Society of Authors Representatives, but now he didn't apparently care. And he, by the way, would end up replacing my editor as editor of Prentice Hall, this literary agent. So anyway, Mark Duke was reporting also to the Lutheran Mills Hegley Foundation Library, which is the DuPont family library on a hill that just overlooks the old Brandywine Mills, the original gunpowder mills in Delaware. And next thing I knew is that I was having trouble with Prentice Hall. And finally, I got wind through Bram Cavan, my editor, that DuPont was in trouble. The book was in trouble. So he contacted William Daly, who's an attorney for Prentice Hall, and Prentice Hall attorney, who had never heard anything like this, supposedly, went to Alden Whitman, and of the New York Times. He also was with LA Times, and Whitman wrote a piece on this. And what he discovered is that Daly had told Grenquist of Prentice Hall that we are suffering because of DuPont interference. And Grenquist responded by saying in August of 74, I guess it was, that the book cannot price profitably under any circumstances. And what was that about? The book had not even been out there. So Bram Cavan
Book of the Month
leaked the story of this to Whitman. Whitman wrote a story on it, and meantime, the Delaware State News was the only non-DuPont newspaper in the state at that time, based in Dover, decided to serialize the book, and the sales in Delaware, of course, went through the roof. So you would think that the company would come in behind that, Prentice Hall. No, and they refused at that point to hold any kind of press conference about DuPont's interference. Instead, they cut the print run by 5,000 copies. They cut the budget by one half. And essentially, Daly, by 75, concludes that DuPont, a Book of the Month Club, knuckled under pressure from DuPont, was trying to limit the book's promotion and circulation. So when the book was killed off, I decided to sue them in federal court. I'd already lost my thanks to my previous attorney, who was not sympathetic to the book, Michael Standard. He lost me my jury trial. So I didn't even have a jury to make my case to. Instead, I was handed to the judges. And after the third judge that got up with it was Judge Charles Bryant. The others two stepped down for some unexplained reasons. But the third judge was Judge Charles Bryant, who was a very conservative Republican based in New York, at the Southern District of New York. And I knew I was in trouble with Judge Charles Bryant when we went into court. And after years of creating these documents and going over them with Michael Standard and him grumbling away about them, finally Judge Charles Bryant, in the middle of the court, heard Irene DuPont on the stand and got up from his whatever you want to call it, and stepped down from the court into the to go over to Irene and turn on the light for him. I never heard a judge or ever saw a judge do that again or before. Apparently, no one else did either. I turned to
Petrus.
By that time, I had fired Michael Standard, and I turned to my new lawyer, who was a former U.S. attorney by the name of Michael DePetrus, recommended by Ralph Nader, by the way, and Ron DePetrus, excuse me. And I said to him, "Big trouble, boy." And the result is that Michael Standard had not given me any warning about what I might face in the court. And DePetrus just was on the wing of it. And he was shocked at the hostility of the court. And so when the trial was almost over, DuPont was found guilty. No, excuse me. Prentice Hall was found guilty of privishing, because we brought an an editor by the name of Decker, from I forget the name of the book publisher he was with, Viking, and he testified about privishing. He had never been revealed before. So so anyway, they decided to kill off the book, and I didn't get very far with the courts. As you can imagine, he called in the attorneys and he said to them in the camera, which means in the court, I'm not going to find DuPont guilty because they're a pillar of American society. But you, Prentice Hall, you who dare to publish this book, well, then you will publish it instead of privishing it. And he offered an award of $20,000 if I would keep my mouth shut. And that was the terms. I refused. I knew the American people needed to know about this. So he found Prentice Hall, found them guilty of that, and allowed DuPont to walk, who were the instigators of it all. So I then went to the appeals court. Didn't do any good there. I ran into attorneys that were all pretty much in support of DuPont. One of the judges was Ralph Winter. I never forget that. He he killed off the book. He led the killing. So I decided at that point to find another publisher as fast as I could and get my rights back to the book. Lyle Stewart came forward, who had published The Rich and the Super Rich with Ferdinand Lundberg. And I decided to go with Lyle. And in 1984, an updated book of the book came out, DuPont Dynasty. And I walked in. The same thing was happening, and nobody knew why, including Lyle. He put a full-page ad in the New York Times. But for some reason, nobody was ordering the book. Well, if they were, he didn't have copies of it enough. So he ordered more books, but the point is that the book was not going anywhere. And so the book died. What we did learn is that DuPont had a connection with D. Nordstrom, which is a publishing house, and they had control over the distribution rights, the same one that had it originally. So the book was not distributed. I then, in the course of going after DuPont, I was speaking about the suppression of the first book when I noticed that a couple of people walked in, and I said, "Who are these people?" And they announced that they were DuPont attorneys. So it gives you a pretty good idea of what goes on in publishing.
It's a fascinating story and really tragic because the American public deserves to know. Are there some stories within that book that you could recite, telling our audience some of the things that they did in addition to destroying a book that criticized them?
Well, the most important thing, I think, was their involvement in the 1934 campaign of the of right-wing Republicans to unseat Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And General Smedley Butler, former commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps, twice winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor, was approached by Gerald McGuire and other people who are described in the book, and he said, we have support, and he mentioned Remington Arms as leading a march on Washington in support of a coup that Butler was supposed to go for. Well, Remington Arms at that time was controlled by DuPont. So once he heard that, there was an effort on the part of I've lost my train of thought. There was an effort on the part of DuPont to find out what the hell was going on with this book. So they sat in on that whole thing, and then
This is Smedley Butler they're talking about.
And Smedley Butler was, anyway, that was their major concern about the book, I think, because he was involved in that coup attempt. It's all described in the book. The Plot to Seize the White House was another book that was written on it too. So
So just to dumb this down for our audience a bit, so we had Franklin Delano Roosevelt as president, and we had the DuPonts planning a coup to remove him.
Yes, there were others involved. Grayson MP Murphy was involved. Grayson MP Murphy was on the board of let me think now. He was tied in with the Morgan interests, who were the bankers for DuPont. He and others really were upset about that. They were upset about the fact that the book exposed completely the growth of DuPont through contracts with the war industry, with the War Department. And matter of fact, their first contracts were with the War Department. They grew into the largest gunpowder trust in the United States. Then they consolidated all these gunpowder trusts into their own corporation and made it the largest gunpowder maker. And as a result, they had enough money off World War I. They made a killing. I think 40% of all the armaments fired during World War I by the Allies were DuPont munitions or Remington arms. And the result was that they made a lot of money, made a fortune. Matter of fact, Secretary of War Newton Baker declared them as a species of outlaws because of what they were charging. After making a killing off World War I, they had enough money to expand into General Motors, which they expanded into and controlled. Pierre DuPont leading the way, who was a son of or grandson of the original founder. And then the others were Irénée DuPont, who is his brother, who is the father of the Irénée DuPont I talked about earlier, and Lamont DuPont, who was his other brother. And the three of them took over. Not only that, they had investment in U.S. Steel, and they decided to go also very heavily into chemicals and buying up the general patents that had been controlled by the Germans, and that were then assigned to the Attorney General's office, and the result is that DuPont ended up in control of them. So from there, they built the chemical industry. They went into U.S. Steel. They went into General Motors. By 1928, they had decided that the economy was starting to heat up, but they were going to make money off it, and they did insider trading. John Jacob Roscoe, who was a DuPont former treasurer and a major figure inside the Democratic Party, became a chairman of the Democratic Party, and they literally invested very heavily in Franklin Roosevelt's campaign in 1932, and then turned on him when Roosevelt realized that he needed to reform the system rather than overthrow it from the right. So he reformed it with labor rights and other progressive legislation that we all know of, like Social Security and so on. And the result is that the DuPonts went ballistic on him. And that's what really triggered their everlasting hatred of Franklin Roosevelt. And they wanted to end whatever they could. And of course, there were major figures in the 1950s, led by Pierre S. DuPont III, who was a very conservative character, in pushing for a two-term limit, which ironically Trump is fighting now. So we have then after World War II, they expanded into the South and built DuPont companies through the cheap labor market, and they also started to expand abroad. They had expanded earlier in the trade relations with the Germans. Now they actually invested abroad. I exposed that what their holdings were abroad, and obviously they didn't like that either. I also exposed their involvement in the Vietnam War, how they were profiteering off that. Uh, I exposed the World War II profiteering, and lo and behold, they also didn't like the whole history of the DuPont family that I was portraying. It was an accurate history, fully documented. 5 years of research went behind it. And it was endorsed by Leon Kaiserling, the former president of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Truman, and got a rave review in the New York Times, as you probably know, and that triggered the DuPont's pressure on New York Times, and because the New York Times ran that story by Alden Whitman, almost the same one he ran in the Los Angeles Times about the suppression of the book. Lo and behold, they attacked him, went on the phone privately behind the scenes to Frank Lubar, who was at that point head of Book of the Month Club. They thought he was head of the Book of the Month Club, but they didn't realize is that Lubar, who was with Time magazine, no longer controlled the New York Book Club, the book club, Times Book Club. So what they did essentially is put tremendous pressure on them. I will say the New York Times stood up to them then, but never again published another review of any of my books. So a lesson was learned by the biggest newspaper company at that time. And that's really what goes on.
Did you define it? Define crime?
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's a wonderful book. I read it. I'd love to have a copy for my home library. That's when I looked it up on Amazon. It's like $100 or $150, but I did read it through interlibrary loan, and
it's quite popular. But we still get sales out of it because we put it into an electronic book version with Open Roll Publishers, and I think they gave the right backs to it now. But at any rate, I still get royalty checks from it. And people still want to read it, but I can't find a publisher that will publish it.
And a couple questions. Well, one is on the eugenics. I recall reading, if I'm not correct, that some of the DuPonts supported the eugenics movement in the 20s and 30s. Could you say something about that? And then I wanted to ask about Joe Biden and DuPont. So the first question would be about eugenics.
Well,
What?
It's on the eugenics movement. I honestly don't recall what I said in the eugenics. Can you remind me?
Okay. Well, it's been a bit of time since I read it. I vaguely remember that, as you say, like some of them had a really extremist, conservative outlook. Of course, there were differences in the family, but I thought I recall reading that some of the DuPonts were involved in that eugenics movement, but I'd have to refresh my memory. So then my other question, is about Joe Biden, because I know, he lived in the DuPont mansion. And so can you tell our readers about his connection with the family?
Well, he never supported the book when the state news was publishing it. He was, I think, a congressman at that point. And of course, we were looking for support from him, and he didn't give it. He was obviously frightened of the DuPonts, for good reason. The whole place has got DuPont Highway, DuPont Building, DuPont this, DuPont that. It really was a company state. Um, Joe Smith, who was the editor of the Delaware State News, was promptly removed by his father for financial reasons and sent out to Phoenix, Arizona, where the father owned a daily newspaper. And so goodbye, Joe Smith. And I ended up with no real support except from the public. And the public came out. They kept buying copies of the book whenever it was available. When we published the second version, second edition, there were lines around the clock, around the block from the bookstore. But it wasn't enough to get it out of Delaware. We never got into the national market as a result. So if any publisher out there is interested, let me know.
And I mean, they were, you said they were originally supporting Roosevelt. So, I mean, you documented, right, that they were often pouring a lot of money into different political figures. Are there any others that you remember who they were supporting heavily?
Yes, the Black Legion was another one. The Black Legion was an organization of Ku Klux Klansmen who actually ran around in not white robes but black robes and terrorized the UAW organizing in the auto fields in Michigan, and to the point that it became a national scandal and the subject of a film exposing them. They were a very dangerous crowd. They had also, one of the DuPonts had supported the Ku Klux Klan in Florida when he moved there. Actually, one of the more interesting members of the family, a rebel by the name of Alfred I. DuPont, whose children actually turned out to be very progressive. He's the one that founded a very famous Nemours Institute for Crippled Children. And then he married a die-in-the-will Savocrat, I can only call her, whose name was Jessie Ball. He was part of the Ball family of Virginia, old Confederate family. And next thing, he expanded into taking over Florida State, the Florida State Railway System. It's called the Florida East Coast Railway, founded by Flager, a former Standard Oil executive. They took it over. They took over the St. Joe Paper Company, which is the largest paper company in Florida, based in the Panhandle. They took over the Florida National Bank System, which is the largest bank system in Florida at the time, which owned banks everywhere from Jacksonville, which is where their headquarters was, to Miami. And as Ed Ball would say when he held his evening after the day's work was done, he would say, pick up a whiskey glass and say, "Here's to the enemy," to bring them down. He succeeded in bringing down Claude Pepper, who was one of the United States senators, very progressive guy. Brought him down through major money that went into the opposition. So they ended up with a good chunk of Florida as well as Delaware. But they continued this chemical involvement to the point that they introduced Teflon. And Teflon, as you know, is made with a chemical that is very, very dangerous. They apparently knew about the danger and went ahead anyway. The company they knew that it was the one in West Virginia, which has become the source of a lot of headlines, polluting the Ohio River, polluting in West Virginia as well. They decided to support that entirely. And as you know, that particular chemical causes cancer. And they went on to produce other chemicals that are just as dangerous, but never quite as notorious as that one. They were also involved in the depletion of the ozone layer through their release of what was called free zone at the time. It was made for air conditioners and so on, that leaked up into the upper atmosphere and was causing a closing in of the shield that supports and protects the planet Earth. So what we have is a company that was killing people. They had a plant called Deepwater, which is, matter of fact, you can still see the plant. When you go over the bridge to Delaware on the New Jersey Turnpike, if you cross over the bridge, you can see this plant on the right. Well, that's the Deepwater plant. And that was known as the House of Butterflies because people were being poisoned by whatever was being produced in there. And one of the things we know that was produced there was also when the Manhattan Project got off the ground, they produced, they were refining uranium to get the atomic energy industry off the ground. They also invested in atomic energy, by the way. So we have, by the way, they even built a subsidiary on nuclear power. So they have a lot of reasons for the DuPont children to be worried about their so-called legacy, which they defend in court by suppressing writers.
And what about today? Would you say the DuPont family is as powerful as ever, or are they starting to lose some of their influence today?
Well, they don't function anymore as a concentrated form because they divest themselves of Christiana Securities in order to get out of DuPont Company. So they've left DuPont Company, but they've left with their money, and their influence is still spread into the companies that they've invested in. But they don't tell you what they are unless you look up. I found their names in a.
Okay.
As far as my cat is screaming, as you can see, he learns a good lesson here. Yell loud. At any rate, okay. So the whole description of that involves also the DuPont's investing essentially into the CIA through Summit Aviation, which was one of their companies. And they were involved in the bombing of the Nicaragua airfield, as you're probably aware of. As a little picture or graph that describes that in the book, and of course what's in it came from the we got it from the press. So
and actually, in my research on Joe Biden, because I think that's when I read your book. I was doing a series on Joe Biden and his background, and I found that he was on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he suppressed an investigation into Summit Aviation. So he was protecting the DuPont family.
Wow, I didn't even know that. And I supported Joe Biden, even though he he didn't come out and support the book. I have no idea what he did around the book. I do know that we decided when we went to court that we were going to ask the former governor of DuPont, former governor of, Delaware, Pierre DuPont, what his involvement was with the Delaware State News, putting pressure on them, which he did. And as I said, ended up with the publisher being sent off to New Mexico. We try to get him more information about that from Irene, but he was not forthcoming in in his testimony.
Yeah, so yeah, it was hard to find. I mean, Biden like hid his ties with DuPont, but yeah, that he lived in the DuPont mansion and that he was kind of protecting them as the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Well, I have no idea about that. I'm really shocked
Yeah,
about
it's hard
that,
to get
but
any information. I mean, it's totally suppressed, but I think maybe there's evidence somewhere that would reveal more intricate ties with Biden and his early career in the DuPonts.
I'll certainly look into that.
Yeah. And what about the CIA? Was that their main connection was through the Summit Aviation, or did you find any other ties with the CIA and DuPont's?
Well, the only connection goes back to Allen Dulles, when Allen Dulles helped them to suppress the Geneva Convention when he was in the State Department. The Geneva Convention had a rule against warlords being funded, and of course DuPonts were involved in funding warlords in China, and of course funding the Nazis, the Germans under Hitler, and then they had contracts with all sorts of. There's a whole chart that comes out of one of these sources that shows the DuPont family connections to the German rearmament program that Hitler was supporting. So we have chemicals, we have explosives, we have the atomic bomb, we have the suppression of books. So it's a wonderful family, don't you see? It's a
Yeah.
pillar of American society. It is a pillar of American society. They got American society right because it's their society. They run the rules, not our society. We have to fight to get it back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I try to do, and that's what I'm still
Yes,
trying to do.
Back a little bit to
Yeah.
Biden. Just for our audience, he served as a United States Senator from Delaware. He was first elected in 1972 and held the seat from January 3rd, 1973 until January 15th, 2009. So it seems that, whether he probably did get some funding from the DuPont family, but the most important thing is he couldn't alienate them, because you just can't
That's
be a
absolutely
state
correct.
senator and not
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
alienate them.
You're absolutely right. He could not alienate them unless he was willing to take on the establishment. Some people did. The founder of the Delaware Defenders of the not Defenders of the Republic, the Delaware Tax Coalition.
Ted Keller.
Yeah, Ted Keller, who was a nemesis of the DuPonts, but he was a Democrat. He supported Democrats. He put them up in his home when they were canvassing his neighborhood, and he was like a surrogate dad for me. He's dead now. He had worked for DuPont for many years as one of their artists, one of their finest artists. That's how he got his pension. And despite his fears of his dearly beloved wife, who I knew, he went on and exposing the DuPonts, and I got a lot of information on the tax lowdown from him, and I was able to confirm that. confirming is everything. You know, if you ever work as a press secretary for a congressman, you can't do anything without confirming everything. And it gave me good training for journalism, and in many ways, bad ways too, because I went after the bonds.
Well,
Uh,
and briefly, you also went after the Rockefellers in your next book, although we don't have time to go into all the details, but maybe if you can just touch on some of the parallels. You know, I think you make a great point that unfortunately DuPonts are America, that they've taken over power and we have to fight them. So you also took on the Rockefellers. So maybe just say something of the parallel of the two families.
It was an investigation originally into the genocide of Indians in the Amazon basin. And it was funded by the National Council of Churches, um, Crown Publisher at the time. I worked for North American Newspaper Alliance at the time,
Fund
and
investigative
and
journalism.
it funded the investigation into the Amazon. I had three co-partners. One of them was Charlotte. That's where she fell in love with me. I guess she had no choice in the Amazon, surrounded by animals and missionaries who, well, they had full set of teeth. So no, it was an amazing investigation. It took us 6 months. We met Roy Bourgeois, who was right after was picked up by the military police in Bolivia and tortured. He was the father of Father Bourgeois was the founder of the America's Watch, who led the demonstrations down
School of America.
on the School of the Americas, where they train all the military from Latin America. Um, so
The Rockefeller.
Rockefeller was an interesting character. I met him when I was running. I was running the Delaware State, Delaware. No, wait a minute.
Which Rockefeller?
Nelson.
Nelson.
I
Thank
met
you.
Nelson when in 1966 when he was running for governor. I challenged him on his position on not interviewing people, not interviewing people that had questions around states' rights, and I was a conservative then. Remember that? So he invited me along. It made headlines, by the way, in the Daily News. Um, so he invited me to come along with him. He said he was very flustered first by the questions that were being raised, and then he finally turned to the head of the college and said, "Dr. Netzer, is this a serious issue on your campus?" "Oh, no, Governor." And And then he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to end the press conference now." And then he turned around and looked at me and he said, "Do you like chicken?" And I said, "Well, sometimes." He says, "Well, come on, I have some chicken with me." So I got in the limousine with him, and we rode down to the chicken barbecue that was held down, and he talked to me about his work in New York. I had found out uh, that I didn't find out then, but I found out later that he was involved in an effort on the part of Columbia University to move their war research, which was being conducted on campus by the Riverside Research Institute, to move it over to three particular locations that were issues for John Dow, the congressman. One was Clausland Mountain. They moved the putting up the scientists that came from around the United States at Clausland Mountain. They expanded the Riverside Parkway to include a widened exit for Pearl River and for the airport. where they were going to fly these people into, um, and the Riverside Research Institute moved abroad, moved into upstate New York, I think it was, or was it New Jersey? But at any rate, they did move out, and I brought it to the attention of John Down. He said, Jerry, I can't do anything about the governor. And I said, these are the three major issues where people are being dislocated from the area. The airport is being expanded, and a lot of people are complaining about these new planes, big planes that are going to come in. And Causal Mountain was a preserve by Columbia. They turned it into this dormitory for these professors. So I said, you got to do something about this. And he said, I can't do anything about the DuPonts.
No,
I mean, about the Rockefellers. And I said, well, then I can't do anything for you. And I quit. So I quit my job at John Dow, but as I said, I had already noticed that the DuPonts were a major issue. So I went down to Delaware to start the research. Nelson had a shining dream, I describe it in the book, of developing the Amazon, just like the American West had been developed when he was out in the American West with his father, when he was a child. And I opened part of the book is opened with that scene of him arriving in an Indian reservation. And he got involved with missionaries, and his father got involved with missionaries and funding their efforts to so-called civilize the Indian tribes. Matter of fact, they were the biggest supporters for Bocconi Institute, which was the school at the time for the Indians. The most important thing I think about all that is that he was taking the lessons of the American West and transported them to the Amazon. Go West, young man. And he invested heavily there. He owned the largest ranch in Brazil, the Fazenda Bocconi, it was called. Hundreds of thousands of acres in Brazil, on Indian territory. And he invested heavily in Bolivia, where they were looking for oil. Creole Petroleum was controlled by Rockefeller at that point, and Creole was very big in Venezuela and in Latin America. He also built rare radio stations throughout Latin America, which he eventually turned into propaganda machines when he became Assistant Secretary for Latin America. And before that, the coordinator of information Inter-American Affairs. And it became the major propaganda operation in Latin America. He took it over lock, stock and barrel after the war. Two organizations, IBEC, International Basic Economy Corporation, one of the largest corporations, building supermarkets to expand the American dream, building Cozinco, the largest mutual fund in Latin America, which he invested in all throughout Latin America, and set the stage for the mutual funds that were established in Latin America, which borrowed from, among other banks, First National City Bank, which had his cousin James on the board as chairman of the board, as a matter of fact, and had his other brother David as chairman of Chase National, and then became Chase Manhattan Bank. These are
Jerry,
companies that are all heavily invested, by the way, in Latin America and Cuba, in Central America. And they went bananas when Standard Oil's facility in Cuba was nationalized.
Under
Jerry,
Castro, right?
we have to wrap it up, and I just would like to give you the opportunity again to tell our audience how they can follow your work and purchase your book. So
You
if
can
we could
purchase
just
them.
flash that on.
You can purchase both books by through Amazon. Basic Books may have a couple of copies too,
And open road media.
and Open Road Media, which you can buy through the Amazon, has copies. People are still getting copies,
And the names of the book are the DuPont Dynasty,
right?
Behind
And
the
the other one
Nylon Curtain, and the other one on the Rockefellers.
is called Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon. The subtitle is Nelson Rockefeller and Evangelism in the Age of Oil.
Thank you.
Get it through the Forbidden Bookshelf.
Well, that the opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jerry. Yeah, that was great. Yeah,
Jerry, we are still live, so don't take your pants off.
Okay.
Is what we say. If you want to finish up some thoughts, we have a little time on this stream.
Well, probably the most devastating blow beside DuPont company that I've felt in my career has been what happened to the Rockefeller book. It wouldn't get the New York Times. HarperCollins published it. I was very worried about going with HarperCollins because they had published a lot of the DuPont Rockefeller books in the past. But the lawyers called me up and said, "Well, look, we published this. We were also tied in with William Cameron Townsend's book, 2,000 Tongues to Go," which Townsend was the founder of the Wycliffe Bible Translators, alias the Summer Institute of Linguistics, which built all these jungle bases throughout the Amazon basin and were involved with the CIA. And of course, they denied that. I found proof that they were. I published it. Nothing they could do about that. I found that the book had been Townsend I interviewed, and he said to me in Waxhaw, North Carolina, which was the JARS Jungle Aviation Radio Service base, and still is there, Waxhaw. And I described what had happened in Brazil, and he said, "Oh, I was not involved in any of that." I didn't. Later on, when he died, I got into his archives, and I found out he was involved. Not only involved, I found a book called Indians of Brazil in the 20th Century, where SIL is described as the source of a whole series of maps of Indians that are hostile in the Amazon basin. The same word, hostile, that they used in the 19th century to describe the Indians out west. And we know what that led, genocide. Well, it was leading into genocide too. So the description of that book and the support for it came from my editor, Hugh Van Dusen, whose father was the head of the Union Theological Seminary, you may know. And he got me into the Rockefeller archives, and I had done research there and found out that that they were involved very heavily in Brazil, and on top of that, that Wycliffe, I found in their archives, was up to its neck in it. And Dale Keitzman had published this book, which had all these maps to show where the Indian tribes were located, the hostile ones. So what's important, I think, was the coup in 1964. The coup in '64 in Brazil was headed by Colonel J.C. King, the head of the Western Hemisphere Division of the CIA. He was in turn a confidant of Nelson Rockefeller during the war, when Nelson was Assistant Secretary of Latin American Affairs. You can find J.C. King mentioned in Adolf Berle's papers at the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Library. I spent 6 months with Charlotte going over those papers of Berle. And it's like an opening to what I call the ruling class of the United States, an opening to understand how the system works and how wealth controls power. So without people dealing with power, including the Democratic Party at that point, and still is, not willing to deal with power, I'm talking about corporate power, except for some individuals who are standing up for it, like Bernie Sanders and Monengami and whatever, and all these. Well, yeah, there are some standing up to them, but most of them are not. Most of them are willing to, and that's the source of their weakness. They're not going to rally the American people unless they do. Franklin Roosevelt rallied the American people precisely by calling the DuPonts profiteers and merchants of death. So, unless the American people wake up to this, we're on our way into a fascist world that the DuPonts wanted and now have. Now, the DuPonts are heavily in if you look up, I'm trying to remember the website. It was a website that talks about donations, and the donations on the DuPonts is still there. And what you see is that the DuPont family was led by Irene into major investments into the Trumpites and the Rockefellers. I mean, to the Trumpites and the Republican Party. Now, Irene was a much more enlightened, you might say, despot. He was enlightened, and he knew that it was just so far I could go, especially after he confronted me once. So what they did is they made sure, for some reason, that the book was not published, and I don't understand why. It wasn't the younger families. It certainly wasn't Abby Rockefeller. She was a great supporter of her uncle's expose, or expose of him. But the rest of the family was quiet, and particularly Nelson Jr., who I worried about, and Rodman Rockefeller, who is Nelson's son, who controlled IBEC. Anyway, we couldn't get one interview by the New York Times. My editor sent up copies after copies after copies up to the New York Times, and not one of them would touch them.
And they gave you a rave review on the DuPont.
Well, yeah, they gave me a rave review of the DuPont, so they
Just for our audience, that's Charlotte in the background. Charlotte, why don't you say
Charlotte's
hello?
my wife. Say hello,
Charlotte.
Hey,
Say,
Don't,
we see a
can't reach
hand.
over.
I can't hear you.
Okay.
There you are.
There. Hey, Charlotte. How's it going?
Hey, Jeremy.
Yes.
Thanks for that beautiful piece. Oh, I wish I had all those photographs in my book. Anyway, I'll get back
Thank
to
you.
you. But thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. It's been great working with you guys. Yeah, I really learned a lot, and your books are terrific.
And we just had Charlotte on a couple of weeks ago about the pipelines, and it was a fantastic interview on the pipelines.
Middle
They,
East.
they both do really great work.
Yeah, it's
What a
really
power couple we
incredible.
have here.
Yeah, it's
Great power
incredible
couple.
research, and yeah, it's a window into the real power centers in America and these families and the oil industry, and yeah,
But
it
it
should be
really
read by
makes you worry,
everybody.
though. It makes you really worry about your future books. I've had trouble now. I'm not going to reveal what the future book is about. I don't need that coming at me over the hill. They will come at me over the hill. There'll be a lot of people with knives, and
This isn't on the air, it's just us,
yeah, I sit with
Oh
my
no,
back.
we're on the air. We're on the air.
Oh, we're there. Good.
Yeah,
sit
we're on
with
the
my
air.
back.
This is as I said, don't take clothes off. We're on the air. You're
I
just
don't
not
take anything off, including I don't even sit like Wyatt Earp did when he sat with his back to the back to the door, and then he was shot in the back. No way. They want to shoot me, they're gonna have to shoot me right in the face or in the head. Make it fast.
One thing I do want to say for our audience is, while we respect the opinions of our guests, Jeremy and I really don't fall into any political party. We see the predator class as united in their shared goals, and we see the left and right and the Republicans and Democrats as two arms that are connected to a body which has the same head. And that same head wants the same things. It may appeal to, a Democratic audience by using certain, gifts, or it may appeal to a Republican audience by giving certain gifts and lip service. But basically, the when it comes to war, and it comes to peace, and it comes to economic survival, it's them against us. It's not, left against right. So I just want to put that out there that, certainly we respect everyone's opinions, but we do have a very different opinion of Sanders and AOC. And we see them as basically saying one thing and doing something else, because, everyone is supported by this ruling oligarchy, and has to play this game, even if they may have personal differences. They still have to,
Well,
do
there
the
are
same
some
stuff.
mavericks. As a historian, I was just reading a book about biography of this guy Burton Wheeler, and he was in Montana, and that state was dominated by the Anaconda Copper Company, and at times he did have to kind of acquiesce, but he often did challenge them, and he was pretty much of a maverick. And he stood up against them numerous times, and he defended labor rights, and he also went after some corrupt people in Washington in the 1920s. So, I mean, on your point, I think there are a few maverick politicians out there, but it's difficult. And yeah, there are wolves in sheep's clothing. We do have to be alert to that, who talk a big game but don't always follow up. And I mean, you can debate about Sanders. I mean, I think he has done some good things, but his positions on a number of issues like Russia and the war in Ukraine have turned me personally against him. So I don't know, how great he is, but there are a few mavericks, but we need more of them. So
Certainly.
Yep.
All right. Well, that wraps up our show. Jayme, where are you?
I'm
I'm
here.
here.
I'm here. You guys
He's
just had
back.
a great
Okay.
discussion. It was really
Yeah, it was
good.
fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that the younger generations definitely need to know about. I mean, this suppression that we're seeing online today, it didn't just start with the internet. It's been going on for like 50, 60 years at least.
That's right. That's right.
And that story is very, very fascinating. Thank you for sharing it today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks,
My
Jerry, for
pleasure.
coming
thanks
on,
again, Jerry. That
sharing
was
your
terrific.
story.
Yeah, great history lesson.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. This show is a
Okay.
great history lesson every week. It seems like I
Well,
feel
I'm
very
not a
privileged to be
historian,
working with
so-
you guys.
I got lots of history.
Well,
to
we
it.
try to link current events to their historical origins so that people can see, this progression and put things in context.
That's
The more
very
things
important.
change, the more they stay the same. So, are you guys ready to wrap it up?
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's just go ahead, and I want to thank everybody for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and just keep your ears open because it'll be on the radio soon, and you could also probably download this as a podcast in the next week or two. So,
Fight for democracy.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Jeremy. It's nice to have everybody still here while I'm closing the show for once. So,
Yeah, usually I have to run, but I was able to stay a little longer.
well, I'm glad you got to do a little bit of an overrun because I will probably use that first part after we've officially wrapped up. I'm probably going to include that into the actual podcast as well. So, thank you all for staying around. Thank you for watching, and it's been a blast today. And we'll be back next week with another episode. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. So keep fighting the good fight for everybody, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Take care.